I just took a nap, and your first thought after you get up from a nap is like, do I have bedhead? Hey BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Book March, and this is my Bookish week for Saturday, May 20th. And let's see, what do I have to talk to you about? This is the first time in a while that I have no pending open orders for books. I know. Why, you ask? Did you ask? I needed to slow my roll and start saving a little money and not stocking up on books to read because I already have books everywhere. Books everywhere. And so I was supposed to go to a library sale today, but I'm filming this on Friday, so I'm not sure yet if I'm going to make it there. I just went to another one a couple weeks ago. I got some great stuff that I already hauled. And I just got a couple of other books that I had ordered a few days ago, but I'm not going to haul those. But I'm slowing down. So I don't really have any other plans to buy any books right now. However, I do keep an eye out on the Kindle deals because I will pick up a book here or there on Kindle deal for a couple dollars. I don't remember the last time I bought a Kindle book at full price. I don't remember. Yeah, and once in a while I have returned a Kindle book, especially if I buy it at full price. And if I read, if I spend a couple days and I read it and I know it's not going to work, you can return Kindle books. You may have a certain length of time. I don't remember. It's either a certain length of time or it may depend on if you've returned any others before that one. I don't remember. Something like that. Because there were maybe 2 that I tried to return that it wouldn't let me. How dare they? How dare Amazon? Anyway, what did I do last week? I finished 2 books. And I have 2 ongoing and another one that I'm about to pick up. So by the time you're watching, I may have already picked it up. So let me tell you first about the books I did finish. I read a very slim poetry collection called Tap Out by Edgar Kunz, K-U-N-Z, or Kunz. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. Can barely see it. It's right there. And this is Tap Out, a short poetry collection. Now, the picture on the front is so stark and jarring. And I don't know if you can tell, but that's a picture of very work-worn, dirt and oil and grease-covered hands. Those are a man's hands. And this kind of applies to some of the poetry in the collection. Now, this is about masculinity, addiction, neglect, violence, abuse, mental health, and it's very slim, but it was exceptionally good. And this is kind of a poetry collection set around Massachusetts, where the author grew up. And I also grew up in Massachusetts. And there were a few of the poetry names that have to do with certain cities in Massachusetts that I recognized. And a couple of the towns that the author was writing about, I have actually been in those towns. So it was really interesting making those geographical connections. But this collection is kind of on the theme of toxic masculinity. And he writes a lot about his father, who is not a very good parent, was an alcoholic, had an issue with keeping jobs, and they were always manual labor jobs. It's about the author's childhood and the violence that is often perpetrated from boys against other boys, even in friend groups. And the title Tap Out refers to a poem that refers to kind of when boys are wrestling and they put each other in wrestling holds and kind of gang up on each other. And the aggressor is telling the boy that is submitted to, hey, if you want to get out of this, just tap out, just say the word and you can get out. And of course the boy is unwilling to say the word and tap out because he would be seen as weak. And that's a lot of what this poetry tells us. It's very masculine, it's very violent, it's depressing, but it's very, very well done. And I really liked this collection. I liked what the author did with the relationship with his father and his mother that abandoned the family. So there's a lot here. There's a lot to digest in this very slim little book. But I think it's very well done. And I do believe this is the author's debut book. I'm pretty sure it is. So Tap Out by Edgar Kunz, or Kunz, K-U-N-Z. Wow, this next book, I had thought this was a reread for me, but as I read it, I'm realizing I don't think I ever read this whole book. I think I used it for a paper many years ago, and it was a reference book for me, but I've since read the book, and it's pretty extraordinary. It's An Unquiet Mind by K. Redfield Jamison, and the subtitle is A Memoir of Moods and Madness. Now, this starts out in the 70s, early 70s, if not earlier than that, because Jamison kind of tells us a little bit about her childhood. She was the daughter of a military father and a homemaker mother, and so they and their family moved around all over the place. She had a sister and I think a brother, 2 brothers, and she didn't discover that she had bipolar disorder until she was probably around 18. She wasn't diagnosed, but eventually her life converged and her mental health deteriorated to a point where she realized there was something wrong with her. And when she looked back at her life, she realized that she felt similarly throughout her childhood. And I could relate to that because I knew there was something wrong with me in my childhood, but I didn't have the words to define it. I had no concepts to put a name to it. But she lived with a father who they suspected had bipolar disorder. He retired from the military, he got a civilian job, he moved the family from Washington, D.C. to California, and quickly got a job there that he lost because of his erratic behavior and the way he would speak to people and the way he would interact. And she looks back on her father's life and realizes he had bipolar disorder. But the remarkable thing about Jamison is she became a psychiatric doctor. A psychiatrist? Did she become a psychiatrist? I think so. But her specialty was not necessarily psychiatry at the time she entered medical practice. She was a psychological researcher and statistician. She did eventually run a psychiatric facility, even though at the time she wasn't a medical doctor. But what was remarkable in doing is showing that this extremely intelligent, successful, high-functioning person lived with a severe mental illness where she became psychotic, suicidal. She attempted suicide. She was monitored and watched by her psychiatric colleagues. She was watched by her family. They kept her on suicide watch numerous times. They were there to administer medications. And this was all as she was a young adult. She had been married at one point. Her marriage dissolved, but she remained pretty good friends with her husband, or ex-husband, who was also aware that there was definitely something wrong. But she documents her life. She documents the deterioration of her brain and the realization of her diagnosis. At the time, it was manic depressive illness, and her depressions were so severe that she at one point went 1.5 years in such a bleak, dark depression that was a suicide attempt that she tried to conduct with an overdose of lithium, which she had been prescribed for her disorder. But she comes out not just on the other side, but she comes out blazing because she was medicated, she was diagnosed, she learned about her disease, she succeeded in spite of it. She became almost an international expert on manic depressive illness and or bipolar disorder. And she went on to write this book and others, and she's kind of a medical expert on this disorder, and did so much research on it that her name pops up in medical papers, journals, other books. It's a pretty incredible story, an incredible success to the study of bipolar disorder. And honestly, this is so easy to read and so well written that I can't say it was enjoyable, but it was so good. The reading experience was very positive. There are times it was difficult for me to read. Just reading about her experiences with bipolar disorder, I can look back to see some of the similarities between her and my mother. I can see some similarities within myself, although I don't have bipolar type 1, which I have bipolar type 2, which is not as an extreme version of bipolar. So a lot of the things that she found herself doing, I've never done. So it was a very interesting contrast and comparison, but it's such an excellent book. It's so easy to read. So if you're interested in learning more about bipolar disorder, from a first-hand account, this would be a great book to pick up. So those are the two books I finished. I'm currently reading two books. I am reading The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is the May book for the Blind Eye Book Club. And we will start talking about this probably the last 4 days of the month if you are watching and reading this book along with me. So far, so good. This is interesting because having just finished A Fine Balance, and I didn't even schedule this on purpose. This is another book set with an Indian family and Indian culture and food. It's really interesting to have done that. I don't think I did that on purpose. And I'm also reading Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. This is the group read for Mental Health May that Marilyn and I decided, let's use this as our group read. I had the book on my shelf, so maybe this is kind of a Blind Eye Book Club annex or Blind Eye Book Club 2.0. And we'll be talking about this book at the end of May. Marilyn and I are hoping to do a Zoom call that we will record and put on our channels talking about this book. And I am about to pick up, or will have already picked up, a book. This is a graphic memoir. Let's see. I believe it's a graphic memoir. Yeah. Now, I'm going to read the back, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about this book. This is Dandelion, written and illustrated by Gabby Hanna. And it is a book about mental health. It says on the back, in this visually thrilling installment of the inner workings of Gabby's mind, we're taken on a journey of self-loathing, self-reflection, and ultimately self-acceptance through deeply metaphorical imagery, chilling twists on childlike rhymes, and popular turns of phrases turned on their heads. Dandelion explores what it means to struggle with mental health in a world where psychological issues are both stigmatized and trivialized. The poems in these pages range from topics of rage and despair to downright silliness and are paired with uncomfortably honest essays about Gabby's childhood and relationships. So if you don't know whether to laugh or cry, just laugh until you cry. So it's a combination of poetry and a graphic memoir depiction. And there's a lot of different types of pages in here, just a couple of examples. There's a lot. Here's some with mostly text. There's drawings of that type. There's a lot of different examples of formats, artwork, writing. So I'm looking forward to this one. Now, what I wanted to mention is this will be the second graphic book that I will have read for Mental Health May, and I actually have a third in my pile of possibilities, and I'm not sure I'll get to that one. But what I'm noticing is graphic novels and graphic memoirs are kind of a newer format of literature. I say newer, but I didn't actually look at statistics as to when their popularity really started to soar. But graphic books at first tended to appeal to younger readers or younger consumers of literature and art. But we have so many examples now of graphic memoirs and graphic novels that appeal to younger readers. And I mean younger, I mean young adult or that type of age bracket. And I think that's why we find a lot of those types of books that discuss mental health and mental illness in an open, transparent way, because we're getting to a place in society where these topics are not taboo, that we don't have to hide the discussions about mental illness and mental health, that we can be open, we can admit that we have a mental illness or that we live with struggles surrounding our mental health. And I really appreciate the type of book like this where there's short pages and artwork and poetry, and it brings things much more strongly visible to a reader. And I think a lot of times artwork can portray things that it would be a harder struggle for words to do, if that makes any sense. So I'm really looking forward to getting further into this one and hopefully getting to my third one for the month. We'll see. So that's it for me. That's it for the last week in my bookish week. Let me know in the comments below if you have any comments on any of the books I showed you, or if you've read any of them. I'd love to know that. And I will see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.